You are looking at something you were never meant to see. A glint, just a flash hidden in the data stream from an object hurtling toward our sun at 88,000 kilometers per hour. It was supposed to be a comet, an interstellar rock, a lonely traveler from the cold abyss. But the new images tell a different story, because comets don't shimmer like this. Captured by infrared and ultraviolet arrays on Earth and in orbit, the latest close-ups of 3I Atlas have revealed something stunning. Not dust, not ice, not gas, but metal. Flat plains where no natural process should carve them. Angular shadows that defy organic formation. Heat signatures so concentrated, they suggest thermal shielding. For the first time in recorded history, astronomers are whispering what was once unthinkable. Something inside 3I Atlas is built, not formed by gravity, not sculpted by time, manufactured. And if that's true, then every model of cosmic behavior, every assumption about comets, interstellar debris, and the boundaries between nature and design collapses. The reflectivity suggests alloy. The structural symmetry suggests control. And the way it holds its vector, unwavering, unfazed by solar pressure, hints at active stabilization. What if we're not just looking at a visitor, but a vehicle? The ancient myths always said they came in fire, that the gods arrived hidden in stars, descending like arrows of light wrapped in silence. The Sumerians named them. The Hopi marked their paths in stone. Now, we see them not in dreams, but in data, and that might be worse. Because if this is a craft, if that gleam is hull, not ice, then it means someone made it, launched it, aimed it, and now it's entering our solar system with a trajectory so precise, it looks pre-programmed. You are not watching the cosmos unfold. You are watching a plan unfold. You were told it was ice, that it was a visitor flung out from another star system, born of cosmic chaos, and ejected into the dark, like so many others before it. You were told comets behave in familiar ways, that they sublimate, they spiral, they glow when near the sun. But then came the new images, and with them, a problem, because this one shines, not all over, just at the edge, just along a band running longitudinally across its core, a band that reflects light too precisely, too cleanly, a band with contours, with linearity, and under the scrutiny of near-infrared spectrum mapping, it does something no comet has ever done. It bounces photons the way brushed metal does, not scattered, not diffuse, channeled, focused. At first, astronomers thought it might be coincidence. Ice crystals aligned just right, a temporary albedo spike, sensor noise, but the Webb Space Telescope confirmed it twice. So did Gemini South. Then Keck, then the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which caught a thermal echo that looks, to every analyst who's seen it, like heat pooling in seams. And suddenly, this isn't about outgassing anymore. It begins, as so many puzzles do, with brightness. On paper, 3I Atlas is far too reflective for its distance. When it was still beyond the orbit of Jupiter, it was already emitting more visible light than most comets ever do at their brightest. That led to theories of a massive coma, jets of gas and dust blooming outward in all directions. But there was no coma, no tail, just the core. And now, that core is gleaming like polished alloy. The surface temperature, measured at 4 distinct phases, does not match its expected solar absorption profile. Instead of warming gradually as it approaches the inner system, it pulses, it spikes, like it is heating internally, or cooling in a way no rocky object can. It bleeds heat, but not evenly, and only along that same longitudinal strip. One European team modeled the reflective band as an internal support ridge, a phrase typically reserved for aerospace designs, not natural bodies. They weren't trying to be provocative, they just couldn't explain it another way. Then came the spectroscopy. Using the VLT in Chile, scientists fired a filtered beam of light across the surface plume and read the chemical signature of what came back. It wasn't just dust. It wasn't just carbon chains and water vapor. Embedded in the spectrograph was a faint but unmistakable trace: vanadium, a transition metal not usually found in comets, especially not at this concentration, especially not arranged in periodic pulses across the exposure arc. Vanadium is used in steel alloys, in temperature-stabilized ceramics, in reactors. So, what is it doing here? That question is now circulating in quiet loops between observatories. No one is willing to publish a conclusion, but several groups are rerunning their data, checking, rechecking, and one, still unnamed, has reportedly spotted another element in the scattering model: titanium. And now, you begin to see it. This is not a comet behaving strangely. This is a structure behaving like a comet. This is a disguise. Avi Loeb, cautious but unshaken, suggested something chilling in a recent panel, that 3I Atlas may not be an object at all, but a shell, a container, a delivery mechanism. He referenced the thermophysical profile of a hollow object with low-density fill, possibly even empty volume, because the math doesn't work otherwise. The outgassing should be pushing it off course, but it isn't. Not even a little. Something this bright, this reactive, should drift. But 3I Atlas remains locked in a line, perfectly on track, perfectly stable, unless it is heavier than we think, or built to resist thrust. NASA's independent team ran a dynamic model and concluded that the mass must exceed 33 billion tons. That's not just large, that is planetary. That is dense enough to resist solar radiation pressure without tumbling. That is dense enough to make you wonder if it is solid or reinforced. And still, there is no answer, no signal, no spin fluctuation, just the quiet shimmer of something that reflects light the way forged material does, with precision. If you were going to design something to pass through the inner solar system unnoticed, you would cover it in dust. You would shape it like a comet. You would mimic the signature of a frozen rock from another star system. But maybe, just maybe, you would leave a hint. Just one, a warning, or a riddle, a shimmer, a seam, a slice of metal where the surface forgets to lie. The glint was seen again, this time by amateurs during an observation window when 3I Atlas passed behind a minor asteroid belt. One observer caught a flare. It lasted 1.4 seconds. It aligned with the same coordinates as the ridge, and when filtered, it produced a specular highlight profile. Flat reflection, like a mirror. What reflects in a straight line in space? Not ice, not dust. You don't want to jump to conclusions. You don't want to say what the shape suggests, or why the reflective points seem to form an arc, but the evidence keeps building, and with it, a silence, as if the universe itself is waiting. You've seen this before, not in waking life, maybe, but somewhere deeper. A dream, a story, a shape carved into memory before you were born. A gleam in the sky that meant something. That always meant something. And now, here it is again, metal in the dark, spinning through space like a forgotten signal. This isn't the first time Earth has stared upward and seen something that did not belong. In 1561, over the city of Nuremberg, witnesses described a celestial battle of spheres, crosses, and cylinders unfolding in the early morning light. Drawings showed black rods flanked by glowing orbs, tumbling and striking one another, before a single dark object descended trailing smoke. Historians called it a mass hallucination, but the shapes match. Even then, 500 years ago, there were whispers. Maybe this was not the first visitor. In 1976, the Viking 1 orbiter sent back photographs of the Martian surface, barren, lifeless, cold. But in frame 35, a 72, a face appeared. A rock formation, say some, pareidolia. But decades later, when higher resolution scans re-examined the region, some anomalies remained. Shadowed cavities, where no natural erosion should have sculpted them, points aligned with solstice angles, and below the bluff, scattered across the plain reflections, tiny, linear, as if something had shattered long ago and left pieces still catching light. Now, in 2025, you are watching 3I Atlas glint the same way, with that same uncomfortable intent, and you wonder, are we seeing it now because it's approaching, or has it always been visible, if only we knew how to look? There's a whisper running through the halls of old observatories, the kind of whisper that doesn't make it into official papers, that an object matching the 3I Atlas path was glimpsed in 1973 during a classified Apollo tracking session, brief, anomalous, and unconfirmed, just a burst on a long-range passive radar sweep. No visible light, no thermal, just a shape, a smooth curve, roughly 15 kilometers wide, traveling too fast, labeled noise, filed away. But what if it wasn't? What if this isn't a visitor? What if it's a return? The orbital path of 3I Atlas, when traced backward with minor deceleration curves modeled into the last solar turn, passes within observational range of Earth once every few thousand years. And when you cross-check that with recorded celestial anomalies, from Babylonian cuneiform to Hopi star charts to the Book of Enoch, you start to see it. The recurrence, the signal in the dust, something big, something glinting, always at the edge of perception, always dismissed. You begin to understand why Loeb's team calls this a memory event. Not because we remember it, but because it remembers us. Because that band of metal running across its core isn't just for structure, not if you believe what one ex-NASA engineer suggested in a now-deleted thread, that it might be an antenna, not for communication, for storage. The theory, if you can call it that, is wild. That the object is a kind of seed vault, not of DNA or microbes or bacteria, but of information, planetary scans, biological readings, psychological telemetry, all gathered during previous passes, all saved, archived, and now, possibly, being updated. That's why the object doesn't tumble. That's why the emissions are timed. That's why the light flares track with planetary alignments. It's not drifting, it's scanning. Loeb didn't go that far, not publicly, but he did write, in his most recent paper, that the trajectory and composition of 3I Atlas are consistent with observational intent. That phrase has sparked an internal firestorm among planetary scientists. Because in orbital mechanics, there is no such thing as intent, unless you are watching something act with purpose. And here's the thing you can't shake. Metal doesn't survive interstellar space for 1,000,000 years unless it was built to. It doesn't maintain reflectivity, heat conductivity, or spectral purity unless it's protected. There are no natural processes that coat a comet in titanium alloy. And yet, here it is. What does that mean? It means we might not be the first species to look up and wonder. It means that the metal you're seeing now may have been seen before. And maybe, just maybe, someone once left a message for us inside it. Something encoded in structure, or frequency, or rotation. Not language, not math, but rhythm. You remember the Fibonacci anomaly, the way 3I Atlas pulsed out emissions in a near-perfect golden ratio sequence during its last perihelion approach. Scientists blamed instrumental artifacts, but no one could explain the harmonic undertones, the layered echoes that followed each flare, like chords. And now, new images suggest that those emissions are originating from within the metallic core, not the ice shell, not the outgassing plumes. From inside, ask yourself, what kind of natural object hides a harmonic transmitter? What kind of comet remembers how to hum? The past is not just history, it is signal, and that signal might have passed us many times. We may have ignored it every time before, but not this time. This time, we are listening. There is something humbling about distance. You live on a planet so small it disappears in the shadow of its own moonlight. And yet tonight, you are tracking an object that has crossed the frozen interstellar void, survived the radiation fields of deep space, and is now within reach of your telescopes, flashing back photons across billions of kilometers. 3I Atlas is not local. It is not bound by the sun's birth. Its path traces a hyperbolic curve that does not return unless it chooses to. And that choice, if it is a choice, opens a door you have long kept closed. Because if it can come here, then anything can. Consider the scale. The space between stars is not empty, it is lethal, full of high-energy particles, gamma bursts, and rogue radiation belts. It is a corridor of death for most materials. Comets ejected from their home systems rarely survive intact. They fracture, they melt, they dissolve, and yet here is one larger than expected, older than expected, still holding its shape, still shimmering with strange alloy signatures in the near-infrared, still aligned to an orbital plane within 5 degrees of Earth's ecliptic, still defying the math. To survive that journey, to reach us now, it must have been built for it, not just by distance, by time. The journey from the nearest stellar system, a lone Proxima Centauri, would take tens of thousands of years at the object's current velocity. But 3I Atlas is not moving in random chaos. Its trajectory intersects planetary orbits with a synchronicity so fine, Loeb calculated the odds at 1 in 20,000, and it is slowing, not by thrust, not by drag, but, as if preparing to remain. Zoom out. Look at the structure of the galaxy. You live in a barred spiral roughly 100,000 light-years wide. Your sun orbits its core once every 230 million years. The interstellar medium flows like a tide between the stars, scattering frozen relics, ancient cores, and radiation-scoured rocks into long elliptical arcs. And in that drift, there are corridors, channels of lower density, gravitational slipstreams, paths a navigator might follow if they knew the map. What if 3i Atlas is not random at all? What if it is part of a pattern we've simply never recognized? The James Webb Space Telescope recently surveyed similar objects on long-period hyperbolic orbits, and one of them, only recently catalogued, shares a near-identical composition signature with 3i Atlas, not in shape, but in emission, specifically in the carbon dioxide to water vapor ratio, 8:1, a value almost never seen in natural comets. And yet, here it is again. What if there are others, invisible to us, or misclassified, or only passing through once every million years, leaving nothing behind but a green spectral ghost in the sky? You start to see it now, the possibility that your solar system is not just a destination, but a checkpoint, a place mapped, marked, monitored. You think of Voyager, of the golden record we sent out into the void, carrying songs and languages and diagrams of our anatomy, spinning outward in a hopeful spiral. You remember that we did not ask permission. We did not send scouts. We simply launched. Now, something may have done the same, a long time ago, from somewhere else, and it has arrived. Ask yourself, what would you build if you wanted your creation to endure the galaxy? Would you carve it from rock? No, it fractures. Would you sculpt it from ice? No, it melts. You would build it from something stronger, something self-insulating. You would hollow it to reduce mass. You would coat it in carbon dioxide to protect against radiation. You would bury it in dust to mask its signature. You would make it look like a comet. And maybe, just maybe, you would send it where you knew life had once glowed. What if that's all this is? A message in disguise, a cosmic postcard, wrapped in camouflage. And what if we are just now beginning to understand the envelope? There's a term used by planetary scientists, gravity assist. It's a way to steal motion from a planet. You swing a spacecraft close to a massive body, and that body's gravity flings it faster. It's how we sent Voyager to the outer planets, how we navigated Cassini into Saturn's orbit, how we slingshot probes into impossible places with impossible speed. 3i Atlas is now approaching the Sun, and as it curves inward, the solar gravity will pull it fast, faster than anything human hands have built. If it makes a maneuver during that curve, a tiny thrust at the right time, it could bind itself to the Sun permanently. It would stay, not just a visitor, a resident, the cosmic equivalent of dropping anchor. And if that happens, if we calculate its new trajectory in December and find it has curved inward, bent itself into a bound loop around our star, then you will know. This was not an accident. This was a decision. And maybe it was made a long time ago by someone we've never met, someone who sent out hundreds, thousands, across millions of years, not as a threat, not as an invasion, but as a question. Are you ready? Are you listening? You have always been drawn to reflections, not just the kind that ripple on water or shimmer in mirrors, but the ones that echo from deeper places, the glint of a polished stone that doesn't belong on the mountain, the polished obsidian blade buried beneath a desert, long abandoned, the silence in a room just before a revelation. Humans do not just look for meaning, you project it. And in 3i Atlas, for the first time in generations, you found a reflection too precise to ignore. You are watching an object glimmer in space, and you are seeing yourself. Not literally, but in shape, in concept, in mystery. Because here is something with edges, with symmetry, with a band of material that shines like alloy and deflects like purpose. And deep down, part of you recognizes that. Not because it is alien, but because it is familiar. You have spent centuries shaping matter into meaning aircraft wings, ship hulls, antenna spires. You know what deliberate construction looks like. You know what design feels like. You feel it now, and maybe that's what disturbs you the most. Because if it's artificial, then so are the emotions it stirs. Wonder, dread, belonging, surveillance. You are hardwired to respond to symmetry as beauty, to reflective surfaces as intelligence, to movement with intention as threat. And this object, this stranger, activates all three. You want to believe it is natural, because natural things do not ask anything of you. But if it isn't, if that metallic glint is what it seems to be, then the mirror becomes a message, a question, and you are on the receiving end. What would it mean to discover you are not the first? Not the first to look outward, not the first to launch machines, not the first to ask who else might be listening, not the first to try. You've always imagined first contact as a conversation, something immediate, something televised. But what if it's more subtle than that? What if it's quiet, slow? What if it's a reflection that drifts into your system and says nothing at all but waits? What if contact isn't something that happens, but something that has already begun? There are myths, always, where this takes shape. In the Dogon tribe of Mali, there is a story of a star that pulses with hidden knowledge. Not a god, not a demon, a traveler, a teacher, one that arrived long ago, buried its secrets in symbols, and left. They say it will return when the people are ready to see it for what it was. In the ancient Hindu texts, there are tales of flying machines made of metal vimanas that appeared in the skies long before modern history began. Some say they were weapons, others say they were messengers, and still others believe they were mirrors built not to destroy, but to reveal. And maybe that's the point. 3i Atlas may not be here to deliver a warning or a gift. It may be here to show us who we are. Because right now, as it shines from just beyond the orbit of Mars, you are not just tracking an object. You are experiencing a test. Can you sit with mystery? Can you accept that you might not be alone and still find peace in your smallness? Because what we fear in the unknown is not invasion, it's irrelevance. That something could cross 1,000 light years and not even notice us. That something could glide by in silence and never ask our name, but maybe it already knows. The surface of 3i Atlas reflects in pulses. Every few days, an increase in albedo, not due to angle, not due to ice, but something else like it's watching, or scanning, or responding. You want it to be mechanical because that makes it legible, but there's a part of you, a quieter part, that wonders if it's something more. You've given machines the ability to see. You've trained algorithms to read emotion, predict thought, even compose art. Is it so impossible to imagine something else did the same? If 3i Atlas contains intelligence, it may not be robotic. It may be ambient, pattern-based. It may not speak. It may only reflect. And in doing so, it may show us the most uncomfortable truth of all, that what lies out there is not so different from what lies within, that we too are emissaries, that we are already part of the broadcast, that our fear, wonder, and silence are signals in their own right. This object, this gleaming whisper in the sky, is not proof of life. It is proof of longing, and that is enough to change you. You listen for the sound, but it never comes. There is no hum, no signal, no burst of static hidden in the spectrum, just data, just the quiet gleam of something impossibly far away, coasting through the void like it has nothing left to say. 3i Atlas continues on its path, still glinting, still silent. The images keep arriving more refined now, filtered through the full aperture of our instruments. The object reflects light the way a blade reflects sunrise, sharply, cleanly, as if forged, and yet it speaks no word. It leaves no wake, no thermal bloom, no thrust trail, just motion. And what stirs you more than anything is this: it does not react, not to the observations, not to the instruments trained on it, not to the chatter erupting across planetary science forums or the cautious pauses in NASA's official language. It doesn't dodge, it doesn't blink, it doesn't care, as if it is already beyond the moment or already remembers it. Silence, as it turns out, can be louder than language, and you are now left to confront the hardest truth of all, that not every arrival comes with an introduction, that some messages are delivered not in sound or symbol, but in presence, and this presence is patient. The ancients understood silence differently than we do. To them, it wasn't absence, it was potency, the space where gods did their thinking, the pause between breaths of the universe. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the stars that fell without sound were seen not as omens, but as watchers, sentinels, witnesses who had no need for noise. Maybe 3i Atlas is the same. Maybe this isn't the beginning of a story. Maybe it's the middle of one you've always been in, because silence is not passive. Silence builds. It asks things of you. It makes you fill the space. Project meaning. Seek story. And that's what you're doing now, looking at the data, frame by frame, hunting for anything that breaks the spell. But nothing does. The object continues its curve toward the sun. Instruments catch brief flares, infrared pulses, reflectivity glints, thermal asymmetries, but they do not crescendo. There is no climax, just rhythm. As if this object was never trying to impress us, as if it was never meant for us at all, and yet we are the ones watching. That alone might be enough to change everything. In the halls of the European Southern Observatory, a senior technician quietly compiled every image of 3i Atlas's reflective anomaly and fed them into a generative pattern model. She wasn't looking for language, just architecture, recurrence, and what she found, faintly traced through the algorithm's conclusion, was a curvature that resembles more than anything a spiral, not a helix, not a circle, a spiral, golden, uneven, expanding, like a fingerprint that never ends. She didn't publish the result. She said it felt too much like belief, but she printed the image, taped it inside her desk drawer, and now looks at it before every night shift, because there's something sacred about a pattern that loops, and in that silence, you begin to wonder not what it means, but what you are meant to do with it. What if the silence is the message? What if the absence of sound is a mirror to see whether we fill it with fear or with awe? What if the object was built not to tell us something, but to show us something about ourselves? This is not the first silence. We listened for Oumuamua. We heard nothing. We listened again, more carefully. when the Voyager spacecraft passed beyond the heliopause. Still, nothing. And now, this 3I Atlas, glinting like a relic, too quiet to be a rock, too precise to be an accident. It is not answering us. It never called, and still, it gleams. Somewhere, above the clouds, above the orbits of Mars and Earth, an object the size of a mountain coasts through space, with a seam of reflective material no natural process can explain. It is silent, intentional, timeless, and maybe that is enough. Maybe we are the ones who must change to meet it, to earn the moment when silence is no longer needed, because silence, like sleep, is only frightening when you fight it. And right now, the universe is holding its breath. It starts with a shadow, not a long one, not something you'd see with the naked eye. It lives only in the margin just 5 pixels wide on a filtered composite from the Mars Solar Monitor Array. But it moves, and more importantly, it stays. The latest images of 3I Atlas were meant to clarify, to reduce the panic that has begun circling in quiet circles across observatories and midnight forums. What they did instead was deepen the mystery, because the shadow isn't coming from the comet, it's trailing beside it. At first, astronomers thought it might be a plume artifact, a calibration smear caused by radiation scatter. But frame after frame, day after day, the anomaly holds position, not static, not drifting, pacing, roughly 2.2 kilometers to starboard of the primary body, riding the same trajectory. The reflective band first spotted weeks ago is now almost luminous. It's as if something underneath has begun to heat or power up. Spectral data shows a mild uptick in narrowband ultraviolet emissions, concentrated not at the center of 3I Atlas, but along the seam, the metallic ridge, the one that never should have existed in the first place. And that is when the second anomaly appears. It happens during a timed sweep from the Helios B array, which catches a brief, faint burst of polarized light. Not from the comet, from the shadow, the side object. For just 1/10 of a second, it shines clean and narrow, like a signal flare without a source. No one can explain it, but the implications are terrifyingly simple. There is more than one object. You stare at the data longer than you should. The longer you look, the harder it is to pretend this is a comet, or a fragment, or an outgassing rock. The movement is too stable, the emissions too regular, the alignment too surgical. No known object, natural or artificial, holds such perfect tandem formation without a shared guidance protocol. That's not gravity, that's a fleet, or at the very least, an escort. No agency has yet admitted it publicly, but internal bulletins are leaking. Analysts at JPL have used gravitational lensing distortion to estimate the mass of the secondary object. It's small, much smaller than 3I Atlas, but it moves with intent. It drifts exactly when the core brightens, as if reacting or communicating. It does not behave like a fragment, it behaves like a drone. And that changes everything. You are not prepared to see a structure inside a comet. You are not prepared to find a seam of metal glowing beneath the ice. But what happens now stretches belief. Because if that second object is real, if the tandem motion is not an illusion, then this is no longer about astronomy. It is about architecture. You are watching something assembled move across the sky, and the silence becomes unbearable, because nothing this orchestrated arrives by accident. What kind of civilization builds something that mimics a comet down to its core temperature, dust composition, and orbital entry profile, and then hides something beside it? You start to wonder if this is not a message at all. You start to wonder if it's a test. The Greeks once told stories of skycraft hidden in flame. The Norse spoke of shining wagons that rode on invisible winds. Even in the old Christian texts, there are moments of fire in the heavens, messengers descending in silence, always light, always motion, always something that moved in ways it shouldn't. And now, here we are again, looking up, not at one object, but two. One, glinting like forged alloy. The other, darker, smarter, invisible to most instruments, only seen when it chooses to be, as if it wants you to know it is real, but only after you've already accepted the first impossibility. That is how you wake a civilization. Not with noise, not with fire, but with a slow, escalating absurdity. First, a strange orbit, then an anomalous shine, then a heat profile that does not match, then a reflection that mimics forged titanium, then a shadow. You are not looking at a comet. You are watching a strategy, and it is unfolding in plain sight. Avi Loeb has remained uncharacteristically quiet. His latest blog post simply reads, "We were always going to misunderstand the first wave." Some think he's referencing Oumuamua. Others believe he's implying this three-eye atlas was never first, just the first to allow itself to be noticed. Because there's a humbling possibility now circling behind the data, that we are not the intended audience, that this was never about us, and yet we are watching. That might be enough. It's no longer just a glint, no longer just a line of pixels flickering in the dark. The latest 3i Atlas imaging data, compiled over 72 hours and stitched from 3 independent orbital sensors, confirms the impossible. The secondary object is real. It has dimensions, not spherical, not jagged, measured at roughly 1.8 kilometers across, with 2 narrow extensions, fins, maybe, or antennae, flaring symmetrically from its midsection. It doesn't rotate, it stabilizes, and that, more than anything, suggests intelligence, because nothing in space stays that still without trying. At NASA's Deep Space Network in Canberra, an early telemetry model shows the secondary body maintaining velocity lock with 3i Atlas within 5 meters per second across distances of hundreds of thousands of kilometers with no visible tether. That level of synchronization is beyond any spacecraft built by human hands. It requires real-time navigation corrections, autonomous recalibration, predictive motion planning. In other words, it flies itself, and something even stranger is happening. At precisely 0300 hours UTC, on 3 consecutive days, the primary object emits a brief flash in the far infrared spectrum wavelengths no comet should produce. Exactly 64 seconds later, the secondary object shifts position by 9 degrees, not randomly, deliberately. Each time, the maneuver mirrors the solar vector, almost like it's adjusting its orientation to account for sunlight. What comet fragment does that? And what does it mean when 2 independent bodies, both of unknown origin, begin performing synchronized, delayed response maneuvers under direct solar exposure? There is a term in spaceflight engineering, attitude control. It's how spacecraft reorient themselves in space. Thrusters, flywheels, magnetorquers. 3i Atlas has none of these, but its behavior mimics them. When exposed to solar wind, it leans. When ultraviolet radiation increases, the gleaming seam glows brighter, and when the secondary object pivots, the brightness fades, almost like they're talking. This is no longer an anomaly, it's choreography. The European Space Agency's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, has now been tasked with continuous monitoring. A leaked internal memo includes language you never thought you'd read. Possible artificial coherence between two co-orbital bodies exhibiting reflective asymmetry and synchronized maneuvering under non-Newtonian stimulus. Translated, they're moving together, and not because they have to, because they mean to. The leading theory, quietly circulating behind closed doors, is that the second object is not merely an escort. It is a key, a guidance module, a remote pilot, a distributed control relay. Call it what you want, but the way it reacts precisely, repetitively, always 64 seconds after the flash, suggests a handshake. One sends, one responds. And in that delay, meaning, R.V. Loeb has called it the most elegantly subtle form of messaging imaginable. Movement. He points out that any species attempting to communicate across species barriers would likely default to the universal constant of motion, not sound, not sight, not math, behavior, because behavior transcends translation. A turn is a turn, a pattern is a choice, and the pattern is now unmistakable. 3 flares, 3 pivots, each aligned with major solar vector shifts, each separated by precisely 2 Earth days. You begin to feel it, the rhythm, not random, not mechanical, alive in some cold way, not biological, but responsive, not conscious, perhaps, but aware. So now, the question is not what they are, it's why they're here. And that answer grows darker the more you dig, because the next burst wasn't infrared, it was magnetic, measured first by the Parker Solar Probe, then confirmed by Earth-based magnetometers. The 4th flare came with a shift, sharp and narrow in the local magnetic field, not natural, not strong enough to disrupt anything, but sharp, a spike, like a ripple made by something turning on, and it did not fade. The magnetic signature remains, a low-frequency hum, inaudible to human ears, but clearly visible in the spectrum, not just from 3i Atlas, but from the space between it and the escort. Something is active now, not flaring, not pulsing, sustained. The latest imagery from the Chinese Chang'e Deep Space Relay shows a glow ultraviolet again, slowly spiraling outward from the central seam. A spiral, the same spiral seen before, except now it isn't theoretical, it's visible, a literal corkscrew of light and radiation, rotating slowly around the axis of the primary body, expanding at 1.2 kilometers per hour. A cosmic beacon, maybe, or a shield, or something stranger, because comets do not spiral. They scatter, they vent, they explode. This one is blooming. You sit back, you breathe, you let it in. Something is coming into view, and it does not care whether you understand it. It is not trying to frighten you. It is not trying to explain. It is simply doing what it was always going to do. And that inevitability feels holy. There is no broadcast, no voice, no alarm, just choreography, glow, delay, silence. And now, Spiral. Leave a comment telling me what you think would happen if this spiral touched Earth. Not in collision, but in meaning, in metaphor. Because maybe that's the point. Not invasion, not rescue, not even communication. Just presence. And what we do when it becomes undeniable, it was never alone. That realization comes slowly, like something remembered instead of discovered. You've been looking at 3I Atlas as a singular mystery, a lonely fragment crossing the stars, flashing its metallic signature, dragging its shadow companion in silence. But what if it's not the first? What if this has happened before, not in your lifetime, not in the last century, but long ago, before records, before reason, when stories still wore feathers and warnings came carved in stone? In a monastery in the Peruvian highlands, there's a frieze that predates colonization by centuries. Worn by wind and time, it shows a curved shape in the sky, tailed, radiant, and beside it, a smaller figure. Not a star, not a moon, something riding alongside, smaller but deliberate, like a servant or a scout. The inscription beneath it is fractured, but the translation that survives reads, "The second eye blinked, and the gods changed course." 2 bodies, 1 course, 1 watching. Sound familiar? A fragment from the Zuo Zhuan, one of China's oldest historical texts, mentions a guest star that appeared in the northern sky during the 6th century BCE, unrecorded elsewhere, lasting for only 2 weeks. It emitted no light, only reflection, and for each night it was visible. The village astronomers claimed they heard a pulse in the air, a beat just at the edge of hearing, like a distant drum. The emperor banned further observations. The sky, he said, should not echo. Today, that echo lives again. The magnetic hum between 3I Atlas and its companion now pulses with increasing regularity. Scientists still debate whether it's natural resonance, interaction between solar, wind, and metal. If it is metal, but others are beginning to wonder, is it memory? Is the spiral a pattern we've already seen? The golden ratio appears in nature, in galaxies, seashells, hurricanes, but also more hauntingly in myth. The Fibonacci spiral has been traced in the proportions of the Great Pyramid, in Mayan temple staircases, in the radial maps of Dogu artifacts from prehistoric Japan, always turning, always returning, and now it glows from the surface of an interstellar object. If this were fiction, you'd dismiss it. But here, in the language of numbers and reflection, there is no metaphor, only geometry. And geometry never lies. There's a tablet in the British Museum, unlabeled to the public, kept in the reserves. It's Babylonian. Inscribed with what appears to be an inventory, metal weights, barley stores, labor counts, but at the end, a curved line, a hyperbola. Along it, 2 dots, one large, one small. The cuneiform reads, "The great vessel passed again. The child followed. All remained silent. The child, the shadow we used to know, we used to see. But time smooths down memory like water over stone. What was once urgent becomes myth. What was once myth becomes bedtime story." And then one day, a machine in orbit catches a flare, and a technician in Australia blinks too hard, because something familiar just passed through the data again. Something curved, something shining. There's a report still unverified, that during a classified Apollo-era transmission window, long before the internet, a deep space ping returned a partial waveform. Analysts dismissed it. It didn't repeat, but buried in the waveform was a spiral compression, matched, by accident, to a golden curve. Nothing ever came of it, until now, because 3i Atlas carries with it not just mystery, but memory. It is a mirror, not only of our hopes, but of our oldest fears that something out there has always been watching. Not cruel, not kind, just observing, and maybe arriving on schedule. That would mean this spiral isn't a weapon. It's a clock, a countdown, not to destruction, but to the next phase. Because if it's repeating, then it's building, like a song with one chord added every time it returns. A loop, yes, but not stagnant, growing, learning, remembering. So what comes next? If the past is echo, the future is chorus, and the chorus has just begun. You think you understand your place in the universe until something reminds you how little of it you've actually seen. Right now, as you lie in bed listening, your entire planet is spinning at nearly 1,600 kilometers per hour, orbiting the sun at over 100,000 kilometers per hour, inside a solar system that is moving around the galactic center at more than 800,000 kilometers per hour. And yet, from your perspective, everything feels still. Stillness is a trick. Movement is the truth. And 3i Atlas moves with the precision of something that has done this before. Its trajectory no longer looks like a random slingshot. It's too clean, too efficient. The curve it's riding, as it descends toward the inner solar system, cuts across 3 planetary orbits in perfect harmonic ratio. Not by luck, by design, as if it understands the layout of our system better than we do, as if it's been here many times. If it adjusts its heading by even 1% at its closest approach to the sun, it can slingshot itself into a captured orbit, one that keeps it here, one that locks it into the very rhythm of our home star. And if it does that, it becomes something we can never outrun. Not a visitor, a neighbor, and still, it reflects. Most interstellar objects tumble. The heat and radiation of a star destabilize them. Solar pressure cracks them open. But this one remains steady, spinning only along a narrow axis, the metal band along its side shimmering with what appears to be thermal regulation. One surface heats, the other cools. There is no wobble. If you wanted to build a machine that could last millions of years in deep space, this is how you would do it. You would not give it speed. You would give it patience. That's what's happening now. Across the vast distances between stars, across light years of emptiness and radiation, something is moving with patience. And that is what makes it terrifying. The silence, the waiting, the precision. This is not something launched in haste. This is something that was always coming. You remember the Fermi paradox, the contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations and the lack of contact. Some say it's because civilizations self-destruct. Others say it's because the galaxy is too big. But maybe it's timing. Maybe some messages don't travel by broadcast. Maybe they travel by object. And maybe we're only now seeing the first one arrive. The trajectory of 3i Atlas originates from the direction of Lyra, but it's too fast, too curved, to have come from a single star system. This object may have passed through dozens, hundreds. It may have drifted across gravitational corridors, taking advantage of dark matter ridges, interstellar wind, and the gravity of stars like stepping stones. There are pathways in the galaxy that we have only just begun to map, rivers of invisible force. To navigate them requires time and foresight. But if you built something not to live, but to last, you could send it across those rivers forever. And what if that's what 3i Atlas is? Not a scout, a message bottle, not one meant for Earth specifically, just one moving through space, dropping into systems, shining briefly in the skies of primitive civilizations, then moving on, until now, because something's changed. The reflection is growing brighter. The tandem body, what analysts now call the companion, has begun adjusting more frequently, every 32 hours, then 16, now 12, as if recalibrating, as if reacting. To what? Maybe to our gaze. Telescopes across Earth and orbit are now permanently tracking it. Military sensors are involved. Space agencies, once rivals, are now exchanging private calls. And the object does nothing. But it is seen, and that might be enough. Because visibility changes meaning. When something sees you back, you can no longer pretend it's inert. You are no longer observing, you are participating. Think about what that implies. 1 million years ago, early humans stared into firelight and wondered what those lights in the sky might be. Now you're here, watching one of them glint with structure, glide with intent, and cast a shadow that adjusts to solar orientation. That is not evolution. That is symmetry. We are the thing looking up. And maybe, just maybe, this is the thing that once looked back. You are not alone in your curiosity, and that changes everything. The moment you look up and realize you're not the center, you begin to orbit something greater. You've been watching the sky for so long that you've forgotten what you were hoping to find. A flicker, a pattern, a sign that something is out there, something bigger, smarter, older. You didn't expect it to come like this, silent, reflective, patient. You thought first contact would arrive with spectacle. Instead, it arrived with a seam of metal on an object shaped like a lie. 3i Atlas was supposed to be a comet, a wanderer, a curiosity, and now it's something else. Something that's begun to reflect not just starlight, but us. Because you can't look at it anymore without feeling observed. It doesn't move fast. It doesn't signal. It doesn't blink. But the longer it holds its path, the more you begin to wonder if this whole thing was meant to happen. If its presence here isn't an intrusion, but a mirror, one perfectly timed for a civilization, ready to see itself from a distance. What do you see? You see ambition. You see fear. You see the way we send machines before we send understanding. You see how we broadcast before we listen. You see the trembling edge of our curiosity, trying so hard not to tip into dread, because we are not ready. Not really. We don't know how to be small in the face of the infinite. We still argue over who gets to name the stars, who owns the silence, who speaks first. But none of that matters to the thing now drifting past Mars, its silent companion following close behind. It doesn't ask anything of us. It just is. And that might be more destabilizing than any transmission. Because in its silence, we are left with only ourselves, our questions, our need to assign meaning, to interpret reflections, to find symbols in spirals and structure in light. It's what we've always done. Look back. When humans first mapped the heavens, they filled it with gods. A lion, a hunter, a sister to the moon. Our constellations weren't diagrams, they were desires. Every point of light became a memory we were afraid to lose, a hope we weren't ready to name. We turned the sky into a myth because we were afraid of what it might look like if it stayed empty. And now that it's not empty, now that something is there, we don't know what to do with it, because it doesn't fit our stories. It's too quiet to be a savior, too precise to be random, too patient to be mechanical. So what is it? Maybe it's a message, but not one you read. Maybe it's something simpler, a test, not of intelligence, but of attention, a way to see who notices, who responds, who looks back without blinking. What if it's not looking for contact? What if it's looking for understanding? Because to understand something is to slow down, to sit with discomfort, to let the unknown speak in its own language, at its own pace. And maybe that's what 3i Atlas is teaching us. To wait, to wonder, to witness. Because this isn't a confrontation. It's a moment, a mirror moment. And what it reflects is a species on the edge of self-awareness. Scientific, anxious, hopeful. We launched golden records. We flung probes into darkness. We blinked radar at empty skies. And now, finally, something has blinked back. Not with light, but with structure, with symmetry, with presence. And you feel it. A pressure in the chest. A hush in the data stream. The shape of a thought that has not yet formed, but will not leave you alone. This changes everything, not because it threatens, but because it knows we're here. And somehow, that knowledge feels heavier than any warning. What do you do when you're no longer the only question in the room? You slow down, you look inward, you wonder what kind of beings you've become, so desperate to be noticed, so terrified to be forgotten, so unwilling to sit in the dark without answers. And now that something has arrived, something built with the patience of stars and the silence of snow, you realize the universe was never ignoring us. It was just waiting. Now that you've seen it, the silence feels different. It's no longer the emptiness of space you're hearing. It's something denser, a quiet that presses against the edges of thought, asking you to listen harder, not with your ears, but with your imagination. 3i Atlas hasn't changed course. It hasn't flared again. The escort object maintains its slow, precise drift beside the glinting primary. But something has shifted, not in them, perhaps, but in us. Because now we believe, not in answers, but in possibility. And that's the most dangerous kind of belief. The kind that doesn't comfort. The kind that doesn't close the book. The kind that opens it wider and leaves the last page blank. We still haven't received a message. No audio transmission. No laser burst. No modulated signal woven through the background radiation. Just movement. Just reflectivity. Just choreography we do not understand. But silence, in this context, is not a void. It's a position. You begin to suspect that we are being allowed to observe. Not invited, but not denied. As if the rules were always in place. As if this was a part of something older. A system of contact that does not begin with words, but with presence. That's what this is now. Presence. Not a threat. Not even a question. Just something undeniably there. And still, it does not blink. The cosmic spiral continues to expand, measured now at over 100 kilometers across, in soft ultraviolet bleed, a mist of symmetry that deepens every 24 hours. It remains invisible to the naked eye. But the instruments see it, and those watching the telemetry say the shape is no longer just growing, it's responding. Solar flares increase, the spiral tightens, solar wind slows, the edges relax. No natural object does this, and still no voice, no command, no message, just behavior. And that's what you find yourself fixating on late at night. Not the thing itself, but the way it moves, the rhythm, the restraint, the elegance of an object that could simply be tumbling and instead chooses to hold perfect formation. Why? Why travel light years just to drift? Why enter the solar system, reflect in a way no comet should, mimic the physics of a human-built vehicle, deploy a second object in tandem, and then say nothing? Unless saying nothing is the point, unless this is the message, that we are not alone, that we are not ready, that we were always meant to witness, not understand, that possibility is more powerful than proof. You think back to the Voyager probes, our own silent emissaries, our gold-plated dreams flung into the dark, hoping someone might one day decode the meaning of Bach, the image of a tree, the outline of a mother with a child. We didn't expect answers. We only hoped someone would notice. And maybe, now, we've been noticed in return. Not with celebration, not with arrival, just with reflection. Because 3i Atlas gleams like a mirror, and you cannot look at it without wondering if something is looking back. There's a term used in anthropology, contact before contact. It describes the moment when two civilizations become aware of each other without direct interaction. A sighting, a rumor, a ship on the horizon. And everything changes. Trade routes shift, rituals evolve, myths bloom, all because the unknown becomes possible. That's where we are now, not in contact, but adjacent to it. And that adjacency is reshaping us already. You feel it in the questions people are asking, the sudden surge in radio telescope funding, the all-night monitoring loops from private observatories, the way scientists who used to speak in guarded numbers now allow themselves to say things like intentional geometry and non-ballistic drift. We are changing, and the silence is what's doing it. Because this silence has structure. It's the pause before the music starts, the breath before the plunge, the space where something vast prepares to arrive. Or maybe already has. You don't need an answer to know something has begun. You only need to feel the weight of what's missing, the stillness in the data, the hush in the voice of the astronomer who whispers that she's never seen anything like this, not in a lifetime of tracking rock and ice. This is not a comet. This is not a fluke. This is not fiction. It's something else. Something that refuses to collapse into explanation. And so we wait, not because we are afraid, but because silence, once it begins to feel alive, demands reverence. It blinked. That's what they're saying now. Quietly, cautiously, across encrypted lines and muted meetings. Not a metaphor, not poetry. A literal event captured across 5 wavelengths from orbit and ground a brief, unmistakable occlusion of light, followed by a double pulse from the metallic seam of 3i Atlas. 2 flashes, separated by exactly 3.14 seconds. A signal? Maybe, maybe not. But for the first time since it was discovered, the object did something undeniably new. It changed. The brightness dropped by 7% for less than a second, just enough to suggest something passed in front of its own reflective ridge. Something internal. A panel, perhaps. A shutter or a window. Then, Light returned. Then 2 flares. Then silence again. And now everything feels different. Because now you're not just watching a visitor, you're watching something wake up. The spiral continues, expanding, now almost 200 kilometers across. Its outer arms have begun to fluctuate, tightening during the solar maximum cycle, pulsing inwards in concert with Earth's magnetosphere, not in force, but in rhythm, almost like it's sinking. What syncs with an entire planet? What adjusts to our space weather? What opens an aperture time to pi? Something that's listening, something that's ready, or something that's always been ready, and finally saw something in us worth responding to. Scientists are hesitant to label it communication. They prefer terms like temporal modulation or albedo variation pattern. But behind the scenes, there is only one word being whispered again and again: acknowledgement. You don't have to understand a language to know when you've been spoken to. And that's what it feels like now, like the quiet has been replaced by a breath. The companion object remains at the same distance, but its behavior has shifted. It no longer drifts with slight adjustments. It now mirrors. Every time the primary flares, the secondary rolls 1 degree, not always in the same direction, but always in response. A dance, a dialogue, not a message, a choreography. You're watching a ballet of light and motion across interplanetary space, and it's being performed for you, not metaphorically, literally, because when you track the timing of these movements, they align with Earth's orbital transit through key magnetic resonances. The same days our magnetosphere ripples. The same days our deep space listening posts reach their lowest noise floors. It's as if the system knows when we're listening best. Or maybe it always did. A new array on the lunar far side part of an international deep quiet zone project has confirmed a narrowband pulse accompanying each flare. Not a signal, just a thrum, not directed, just present. A sustained note, as if space itself had begun to ring. The frequency, 431 Hz, the same pitch as a tuning fork, used in orchestral calibration, not proof, not even pattern, but resonance. You're beginning to feel it now, not just as data, but as pressure, a sense that something enormous is shifting beneath the surface of the known. You used to think that contact would be obvious, that it would come in code or lights or landings. But now, you're seeing a stranger possibility, that it was always going to arrive slowly, that they, whoever they are, knew we would only be ready when we were calm enough to observe. And now we are. For the first time in human history, billions of eyes are watching the same object for the same reason, not because of fear, but because of possibility. It has become a kind of global ritual. People are meditating during the flare windows. Artists are sketching the spiral into their canvases. Musicians are building compositions around the frequencies. Children are learning the object's name before the names of stars. We have begun to make room for it in our myths, and maybe that was always the goal, not to answer our questions, but to give them shape. You can feel it, the planetary heartbeat shifting, not just in science, in culture. This thing, this cold, gleaming structure riding a perfect curve beside our sun, is beginning to redefine how we think of ourselves, not as alone, but as noticed, and what comes next might be an invitation, or a mirror, or just a hand extended across time, saying, "We see you." There is a rhythm to the unknown. You don't always recognize it at first. It begins as noise, as static in the stream, as random flutter in the data. But the more you look, the more you see that it repeats. Not constantly, but with meaning, with intervals. And now, the rhythm is becoming clear. 3i Atlas has started blinking, not figuratively, not metaphorically. Actual measurable dips in brightness, short, rapid, precise, like shutters opening and closing, like code. The latest from the European Southern Observatory confirms it. 12 distinct flashes over a 48-hour period, each one separated by 1,118 seconds, each followed by a microburst in the lower gamma spectrum, lasting just under 1/10 of a second. The signature is too structured to be geological, too synchronized to be thermal, too controlled to be chance. It is not just reflecting anymore, it is emitting. NASA has not yet confirmed, but the James Webb Space Telescope was quietly repointed toward the object 3 nights ago, not for visual imaging, for spectroscopy. They're not looking at the surface anymore, they're trying to see through it. Whatever 3i Atlas is, it is no longer acting like a passive body. It is not just traveling, it's behaving, responding to solar wind, reacting to Earth's magnetosphere, aligning flares to times of lowest background noise, adapting its visibility in ways that suggest a real-time intelligence, or at the very least, anticipation. But then something changed. The secondary object, the companion, has split. That's the word now making the rounds. Fission event. Caught in 3 exposures from a Chilean ground-based array, and later confirmed by the Indian Space Research Organization's SkyMap satellite. One object became 2, slowly, without force, without explosion, as if one form became 2 by intention, not failure. Now, there are 3, all moving in the same formation, all blinking, in sequence, 12-second bursts, pauses, gamma pulse, silence. It's Morse, some say. It's mathematics, others say. It's alignment, say the rest. But no one agrees on what it means. Because what if it's not language at all? What if it's an invitation to notice, a calibration, a way to shape our attention into pattern? Some engineers have begun calling the flare structure a time grid. They're mapping the intervals, predicting when the next ones will come, and the pattern, when rendered visually, begins to resemble something hauntingly familiar, a logarithmic spiral. The same geometry seen in hurricanes, galaxies, pine cones, and the golden ratio. This is no longer about orbit. This is choreography, and choreography is not random. You don't choreograph a trajectory unless there's something or someone watching. Now governments are watching too, not openly, but enough that the ESA, NASA, Roscosmos, and JAXA have all established a closed joint task group to coordinate high-bandwidth sensor data. Their name for the working group? Project Echo Frame, and the brief, quietly leaked to a few observatories, contains this phrase: Object ensemble exhibits increasing structural complexity, organized emissions, and non-ballistic co-rotation. Hypothesis: distributed logic system or fractal guidance matrix. 19. Translated: this may not be a ship, it may be a network, something that unfolds in parts, that grows as needed, that reveals itself slowly, not because it hides, but because it teaches. That is the new theory, that we are being taught how to see it. Each flare is a lesson in timing, each echo a calibration of perception, Each duplication, a step in some ancient unfolding logic we're only now beginning to trace. And through it all, the silence holds. No voice, no language, just motion, just reflection, just rhythm, like a heartbeat in the dark. And now something deeper has emerged. Researchers studying the electromagnetic wake of the three bodies have detected interference patterns, shimmering, wave-like disruptions in the solar wind behind the trio. When mapped, these disruptions form long, elegant threads, tendrils, ribbons, as if the objects are leaving trails not of debris, but of data. Some say the trails resemble information pathways. Some say they match ancient quipu knots used in Andean cultures. Some say nothing at all, because there's too much to say, and still no message, just evidence, more and more of it, enough to shake what you thought was real, enough to realize we may not be witnessing the arrival of something new, but the return of something very old. We've seen this before, not in photographs, not in telescope data, but in stories, etched into bone, painted on cave ceilings, written in languages now lost to time. The form may differ, the context may slip, but the shape, the idea remains. A spiral, a glint, a watcher that does not speak. 3i Atlas is new to our modern minds, but old to something deeper, something we've carried since long before we had names for orbits, or gamma rays, or telemetry patterns, something that flickers awake when we see metal where none should be, motion where there should be stillness, pattern where there should be noise. This has happened before. There are scrolls locked in the restricted vaults of the Vatican that describe a silent procession of stars seen over the Syrian desert in the year 461. The account is brief, but it mentions 3 pale lights moving in perfect alignment, visible during the day, leaving no shadow and no sound. The witnesses reported strange dreams for weeks after. Drawings scrawled in the margins of those scrolls show not flames, not crosses, but spirals. In the Tunguska region of Siberia, decades before the Great Blast of 1908, the Evenki people spoke of a sky serpent with 3 heads that moved through the air without wings. They feared it, not because it destroyed, but because it waited. It hovered for days, unmoving, then vanished west. They said it left a noise in the bones of the reindeer, a pulsing, a hum. That hum has returned. The Lunar Listening Post reports that the low-frequency signature of the 3i Atlas system is no longer background. It has stabilized into a constant tone, 431 Hz, the same as before, but no longer episodic. Now it's continuous, a song with no modulation, no pattern, just presence. And when you step back and compare the wave structure of that tone to certain ancient instruments, like the Sumerian silver lyre, you find a strange symmetry. Harmonic intervals that match those used in rituals honoring visitors from the upper field. That's what they called them. Not gods, not demons, visitors. And the upper field, the night sky. Where did they go? Maybe they never left. Maybe they just waited until we had built enough mirrors to finally see what was always circling above. A comet that is not a comet. A trio that splits and sings and shines with a shimmer we now understand to be built, not born. But this isn't about belief. It's about correlation, data, pattern. Avi Loeb recently published a timeline of all known interstellar anomalies from recorded history. matched against the 3i Atlas path when projected backward across millennia. The overlap is uncanny. 17 of the most mysterious celestial sightings in history align with previous possible pass-throughs. Nuremberg, Kyoto, Comet, Teotihuacan, all places with records of silent visitors, all places where spiral motifs appear in sacred geometry, all within a narrow band of sky matching the object's ingress vector. This is not a straight line, it's a return loop. It keeps coming back, and we've kept forgetting. Maybe because we weren't ready, maybe because the contact was never about suddenness, maybe it was always about echo, resonance, a long, slow alignment between our ways of knowing and its way of being. Now, for the first time, the frequencies match, not just in tone, in mindset. We've built machines that can hear the spiral. We've designed telescopes that can see the seams in its surface. We've trained algorithms that can track its flares, translate its shadow dances, and synchronize our curiosity with its motion. And just like that, we've tuned ourselves into its signal. That might be all it was ever waiting for. Because the past isn't just a memory, it's a rehearsal. Over and over again, civilizations looked up, saw the spiral, and tried to name it. Some called it divine, some called it forbidden, some never spoke of it again. But every time, they left a mark. Petroglyphs, star charts, murals of beings wrapped in light, accompanied by 3 companions, sometimes stars, sometimes orbs, sometimes wheels. The symbols vary, but the formation does not. 3. Moving as one, as above, so below. Now, 3i Atlas is above again, just beyond Mars, its mirrored seam still shining, its companion objects now flanking it like wings, flaring at intervals that mirror the beat of old ritual drums, pacing each other like dancers on an ancient stage. And still it does not land, still it does not speak, still it waits. So do we, but not blindly anymore. Now we wait with memory. Now imagine this. You are not a creature of decades, but of eons. You are not born, you are assembled, not to live, but to last. You do not breathe, you do not hunger, you do not blink. You orbit, not a star, not a planet, a mission, and you have traveled farther than light can remember. Because 3i Atlas, whatever it is, did not come from here. Its orbit is hyperbolic, an escape curve. Its speed exceeds solar capture unless it corrects. And yet, it hasn't corrected. It hasn't fled. It's lingering. That's what astronomers are calling it now. Not passing, not transiting, lingering. Because its deceleration curve doesn't match gravitational drag. It's moving slower than it should, as if braking, as if watching. From a cosmic point of view, this is not impossible, just rare, very rare. The likelihood of a natural object from interstellar space entering the inner solar system and staying is nearly zero. Unless it wasn't natural, unless it was aimed. And if it was aimed, the question becomes, by whom? And more importantly, when? Because the timescale of this journey defies civilization. At its current speed, 56 kilometers per second, if it originated from even the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, it would have taken over 26,000 years to arrive. From the next cluster, 100,000. From the galactic arm beyond, millions. So whoever sent it, if it was sent, is either gone or far beyond us. And yet, it waits. And yet, It gleams, and yet it splits and pulses and mirrors in a way that suggests awareness. Not the awareness of a mind, but of a purpose. This is where you must shift your understanding, because purpose doesn't need breath, intention doesn't need language. The most powerful machines ever built on Earth don't speak, they act. They behave in alignment with design. And what you're seeing now is behavior. The companion objects are not just moving, they are resonating. Their motion is tuned to the background cosmic microwave fluctuations, one of the least variable forces in the known universe. And yet, they respond, adjusting pitch, flaring slightly when localized dips in background temperature are detected. How would a machine detect that, unless it was built to listen, not to us, not to Earth, but to the galaxy itself? Avi Loeb once asked, what if the first thing we meet is not intelligence, but endurance? What if the civilization that contacts us isn't living but remembered? That's what 3i Atlas might be, a memory in motion, a slow golden seed drifting through star systems, waiting only for resonance, for reflection, for alignment. Because think about it, if you wanted to send a message that would survive millions of years, you wouldn't shout, you would glide, you wouldn't blast through space. You'd follow the rivers of gravity, the Lagrange corridors, the galactic slipstreams, the interstellar bridges formed by overlapping fields. You'd use motion as your fuel, time as your language, patience as your propulsion, and you'd shine only when seen, which is exactly what 3i Atlas has done. It never announced itself. It simply became more visible the closer we looked. It adapted to our senses, responded to our gaze, not with language, but with movement, and now, with presence. And what presence it is! The three bodies now form a near-perfect isosceles triangle, one of the simplest and most stable configurations in celestial mechanics. Their spiral emission, once faint and irregular, is now pulsing with precision, one long, two short, one long, two short. It's not Morse, not binary, not modulated in a way we can yet decode, but it is regular, it is behavior, and when you chart the location of each pulse across time, something astonishing happens. They align, not just with themselves, but with us. Each burst coincides within a margin of seconds, with moments of global sensor quiet, gaps in our own electromagnetic storm, as if the system was timing its visibility, as if it knew, not just that we're here, but how we listen. And now, the questions multiply. Is it alone? Are there more like it? Have they already passed us? Have they been watching for millennia? Or is this the first to arrive in an experiment that spans the spiral arms? Think about what that means. That there could be a network of silent objects, each a message not in voice, but in presence gliding through the galaxy, not seeking to colonize or command, but to reflect, to reveal, and maybe to find others who know how to watch. What does that make us? If 3i Atlas is a mirror, then maybe we are its answer, not its audience. Its echo. It's not what you expected, not the silence, not the shimmer, not the spiral that keeps unfolding in the void like it knows you're watching. You thought discovery would feel louder, bigger. You imagined lights in the sky, broadcasts in synthetic tongues, a line drawn suddenly between before and after. But this is gentler, and somehow that makes it more real, because this isn't a spectacle, it's a mirror, and as it drifts closer, unthreatening, deliberate, undeniable, you begin to see not just what 3i Atlas is, but what it is making you become. You are, for the first time in generations, a species that is listening, not to each other, not to your fears, but to the sky. And that is changing you. There are children now who know the name 3i Atlas before they know the names of constellations. They watch the new flare data every morning over breakfast. They know the rhythm of the triple object's pulse pattern better than nursery rhymes. To them, the mystery isn't terrifying. It's familiar, reassuring, the way weather used to be. What began as anomaly is becoming ritual. People gather to observe the spiral events, like eclipses. Artists sketch the triangular formation onto walls, postcards, skin. Poets fold the three lights into new myths. They are calling them the listeners, the shepherds, the echoes. No one agrees on what they are, but everyone agrees on how they make us feel. Calm, alert, small but held. The fear is still there, tucked beneath the surface of wonder. It pulses in certain conversations. What if this is a test? What if this is a warning? What if this is only the first part of something much larger? But even those questions no longer arrive with panic. They come wrapped in reverence, as if, somehow, we know we are standing at the edge of something ancient, and whatever it is, it has already seen us. What does that do to a species? What does it change? The answer, it turns out, is almost everything. The SETI initiative has seen a surge in private funding not witnessed in 4 decades. Amateur radio groups are building synchronized listening stations around the world, not to transmit, but to harmonize. Not to speak, but to be still. People are not screaming into the void anymore. They are tuning themselves to it. And that's the shift, because when the universe stares back, your role changes. You are no longer the lone observer. You are the observed. Not in a sinister way, but in a reflective one. You become part of the experiment, part of the message. Your choices, how you act, what you become, what you choose to notice, matter. And maybe that's what this was always about. Not alien contact, but human contact with ourselves. The emergence of the 3-body formation has awakened something old in us, a need for connection that extends beyond species, beyond language, beyond logic, a desire to matter to something vast, to be seen by something that does not have to see us, but chooses to. And that's the part that brings you stillness at night. Not that they are here, but that they stayed. Not that they signaled, but that they adjusted to our gaze, to our instruments, to our pulse. That suggests not domination, but grace. Some say it's a machine. Some say it's a probe. Some say it's a test left behind by something long gone. But those are just categories. None of them explain the feeling, the way it quietly rearranges the architecture of our thinking. We're starting to design things differently. Buildings that reflect light, like the spiral. Music that mimics the flare intervals. Data patterns that fold time into logarithmic arcs instead of linear lines. We are becoming fluent in the language of the unknown, not to decode it, but to mirror it, as if the act of noticing is, in itself, an answer. There's an old story, half folktale, half truth, of a Polynesian navigator who could feel islands before they came into view, not by seeing them, but by sensing the way the waves changed beneath his canoe. A softness, a rhythm, a signal that something solid, something sacred, was ahead. That is what this moment feels like. You cannot see the shore, but you can feel it approaching. It has not spoken, not once, not in voice, not in radio, not in flash, not in flame. And yet, it continues, drifting, gleaming, expanding. 3 objects, perfectly aligned, performing a slow, wordless ritual in the emptiness between Mars and the Sunday. The spiral extends past 250 kilometers now, still invisible to human eyes, but not to the sensors, not to the machines that listen in silence, not to the minds that wake each morning wondering if this is the day it says something new. But it doesn't. It just turns. Just a little. 1 degree every 30 hours. Like a clock, or a flower facing light, or a face turning towards something unseen. You can't explain it anymore. Not with Newtonian physics. Not with guesses. Not with metaphors. The data is too precise. The movements too symmetrical. The hum too steady. And still no transmission. No pattern in the pulses that suggests a language. No code buried in the brightness. No command hidden in the spiral. Just presence. Just choreography. Just the long, slow unfolding of something vast and cold and watching. And what chills you more than anything isn't what it's doing. It's what it isn't doing. It isn't reacting, not to the instruments, not to the chatter, not to the 1,000-pointed radar waves now pinging it from Earth and lunar and orbit. It behaves as if none of that matters, or perhaps as if all of it has already happened, as if this moment is not a new event, but the middle of a memory. The data keeps coming. The spiral now pulses faintly every 72 hours, not with light, not with radiation, with gravitational microfluctuations, a subtle shifting in the local fabric of space-time, so slight it can barely be measured, but measured it is. 3 pulses, then stillness, like footsteps or breathing. What kind of machine does that? What kind of visitor waits this long? You used to think of silence as absence, but now you feel it differently. It isn't empty, it's expectant. A room just before someone enters, a page just before the pen touches down, a heart just before it breaks open. The 3 lights remain unchanged in formation. Their motion relative to each other is perfect within millimeters. No drift, no correction burns, no visible means of stabilization, and yet they hold. It's a kind of discipline we can't yet replicate, a kind of stillness that feels impossible for anything built by hands. But maybe it wasn't built by hands. Maybe it was grown, or shaped by something that thought in spirals, or perhaps it built itself over thousands of years, drifting system to system, adjusting only when necessary, revealing only what is required, because now it's doing something else. The ultraviolet spiral is starting to curl back inward. That's the new data from the solar orbiters. The outward curve has peaked. Now it folds, slowly, gently, like a closing petal, like a camera iris, like the beginning of something ending. But why? Why now? No object has approached. No signal has been sent. The observers are still watching, still listening, still wondering. And that may be the answer. Maybe the moment has passed. Maybe this wasn't the arrival. Maybe it was the window. A moment we were meant to witness, not interrupt, not solve, just see. That kind of silence changes a species. It teaches humility and awe, and the quiet art of waiting without expectation. And that is where we are now, not in crisis, not in celebration, in vigil, because when something stirs the stars without saying a word, you don't shout, you listen, you lower your voice, you slow your breath, you look up and you wait. The Fermi paradox has never felt more fragile. The idea that we are alone has never felt more absurd. Something has passed through us. Whether it remains, we don't know. But the spiral glowed, the lights held formation, and the silence has deepened. You almost missed it. One frame, buried inside a burst of solar interference, just 30 milliseconds long, captured by a telescope in Chile, then confirmed by 2 observatories in Australia and South Africa. A shimmer, no, a shadow, but not like before. This one had depth, not a flare, not a reflection, an outline. Something moved inside the primary body of 3I Atlas. For weeks, the surface has remained unchanged. The mirrored seam, the metallic gleam, the slow coasting formation of the 3 aligned objects, all of it consistent, predictable, and strangely beautiful. But now, something has shifted. At precisely 1:03 UTC, on a night when solar wind was at its lowest and the cosmic background was particularly quiet, the object dimmed just slightly, enough for the internal structure, whatever it is, to become briefly visible. The image isn't clear, but it looks like a chamber, not hollow, not smooth, layered, dense, and in the center, a shape unlike anything seen so far. Hexagonal, pulsing, just once. A heartbeat? A beacon? A trigger? No one knows. The data isn't clean. But what matters is not the image. It's the reaction, because 64 seconds later again, always 64, the companion objects flared. Both of them, together, not in rhythm, in sync. For the first time since their appearance, their light didn't alternate. It merged, a double flare, unified, and then they changed formation, not dramatically, but enough. The isosceles triangle shifted. The long edge contracted by 22 kilometers. The short base widened. Now, the 3 objects form a shape that mirrors something found in biology, not astronomy. The structure of a neuron, 3 bodies, 1 core, 2 branches, and now, the object at the center, the original, the shining one, begins to dim, very slowly, gradually, as if powering down or preparing for something else, something new. You feel it, don't you? That hush again, but this time, it's not the hush of mystery. It's the hush of anticipation, a silence that waits with intent. And then something else happens. The pulse resumes, 431 hertz, still, but this time, it's modulated, a warble, a shift, up, then back. A single vibrational curl inside the tone. It only lasts for 2 seconds. But it is different. Not random, not ambient, controlled. This is not background hum anymore. This is communication, or at least signal. And this time, the directionality is measurable. The pulse did not radiate equally in all directions. It angled gently toward Earth. No response was sent, no message was received, but the spiral began to glow again, just faintly, like breath returning to the chest of a sleeper. You are witnessing something emerge, not fast, not loud, but deliberate, and for the first time, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in many chapters of this strange cosmic unfolding. Welcome, not invitation. Not explanation, but welcome, the kind that doesn't need to say anything, the kind that waits, opens a door, and steps back. Because maybe that's what's happening now, not the climax of a mystery, but the beginning of our part in it. The way a play doesn't start when the curtain rises, but when the lights begin to dim. This could be that moment. The lights are dimming, the spiral is pulsing, the tone has shifted, and the three bodies still gliding together, still impossible, are now moving slower. Earth's instruments confirm it. Deceleration, by design, not in preparation to land, not in reaction to gravity, but as if lingering, as if choosing to remain a little longer, to be noticed just a bit more, to make sure we're still watching, and we are. More than ever, the human eye is now trained to recognize the flare, the gesture, the pulse. People have built apps to track it, watch lists to follow it, paintings to mirror it, meditations to honor it. The object has become part of our rhythm, part of our language, and now it may be speaking back. The spiral isn't just glowing anymore, it's shifting, subtly, geometrically, with a precision that leaves no room for doubt. This is not diffusion, not debris, not ionized gas behaving under solar pressure. This is design. The glow now curls inward on three axes, forming a rotating tetrahedral shape, an open cage of ultraviolet scaffolding, turning slowly through space, surrounding the original central object like a symbolic cradle, or a frame, or a door. The objects haven't accelerated, they haven't changed heading, but something about the way they hold their place has changed. They are anchoring, and the pulse, the one at 431 Hertz, has begun a new rhythm. It arrives now every 12 hours, not once, but in 3 bursts, and each burst is slightly modulated from the last. The difference is too subtle for the human ear, but algorithms at SETI's Allen Array detect tiny phase shifts. The waveform is bending, not for show, for content. It's a language without words, a structure without letters, something shaped not for speech, but for recognition. The pulses arrive when the sun's magnetic field is at its weakest, always from the same angle, always targeting Earth. 3 pulses, 12 hours, a signal loop, and now we're responding, not with broadcasts, not with language, but with observation. 6 satellites across 4 space agencies have begun coordinated passive return sweeps. Not beams, not messages, just reflective resonance, the electromagnetic equivalent of holding up a mirror and waiting for the light to bounce back. And something is bouncing back. Each time the return pattern is triggered, the formation brightens just a little. A flare, a gesture, a blink. It's not coincidence anymore. It's acknowledgement. You feel it in your chest. That moment when the sky no longer feels empty, when distance no longer equals silence, when you are part of the experiment, a participant, not a viewer. The spiral widens again, not outward but sideways, like a wave sliding across an unseen surface, and for the first time, a new spectral line appears. Not ultraviolet, not infrared, but in soft gamma, a brief ripple, lasting less than 0.3 of a second. It appears precisely when Earth's Schumann resonance peaks, our planet's own electromagnetic heartbeat. That's not a glitch, that's a reply, or a harmony, or a touch. Avi Loeb's newest paper doesn't make headlines, but it reaches the inboxes of every major observatory. His title is simple: contact without contact, a proposal for observational dialogue. And the core thesis? That contact may not require signal exchange, but mirrored state. That behavior aligned across time is a conversation, and that's what this has become. A conversation of motion, of rhythm, of reflection, a call and echo between a species of breath and a trio of silent lights. And now, the pattern tightens. The objects are moving closer to one another, not fast, just gently. The distances shrink by less than a kilometer per day. But in space, that's intimacy. And then it happens. The spiral retracts, not fades, retracts, pulls in on itself like a petal folding in darkness. The scaffold begins to dim. The tetrahedral shape collapses back into the gleaming seam on the original object. The companions halt their slow convergence. All three bodies return to stillness, and one more pulse is sent. Longer, louder, low. This time, it is audible, converted through harmonic decomposition. The signal is run through deep wave interpreters in Switzerland and Japan. What emerges is not a word. It is a shape, a spiral, yes, but nested now inside another, a double helix. DNA? Possibly, but the arrangement isn't biochemical, it's temporal. The shape matches the Fibonacci sequence plotted not in space but in time intervals. A code, perhaps, or just a reminder that the same patterns found in galaxies are found in pine cones, that the same ratios found in flowers are found in civilizations, that the shape of emergence is always spiral, and now it is stopping. The spiral, the hum, the pulses, all cease. The objects do not vanish. They remain, but they rest, and the silence is full again. But it's not the same silence. It's not absence. It's echo, because we spoke, not with words, but with mirrors. Leave a comment telling me what you think we've just witnessed, not technically, but existentially, because this may not be the end of contact. It may be the end of needing it, and the beginning of something else. They didn't leave. They didn't speak. They didn't explain, but they stayed. Three objects, now drifting just beyond Earth's orbital path, still in perfect formation. No pulses, no flares, no glow, just presence, silent, stable, still. And that stillness changes everything, because in the absence of noise, we began to hear. In the absence of answers, we began to ask the right questions. And in the hush that followed the spiral's collapse, we started listening for more than proof. We listened for meaning, and maybe that's what 3i Atlas brought us. Not contact, not closure, but composure. For the first time in recorded history, all of humanity focused on the same unknown, not to fear it, not to conquer it, but simply to witness it. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a god descending from the clouds. It was something older, quieter, more patient than anything we've ever known. And somehow, it knew us, not by name, not by language, but by rhythm, by gaze, by resonance, like the way a canyon knows your voice before it echoes, or the way a mountain holds your shadow in its silence. This is not science fiction anymore. This is history. The telescopes still watch. The recorders still run. The data still pours in. But nothing new has happened. And maybe nothing needs to, because something changed inside us. Not just in the institutions. Not just in the instruments. In the stories. The bedtime ones. The whispered ones. The The ones that begin not with "once upon a time," but with "did you see it last night?" The lights, the spiral, the mirror. A child in Iceland draws the trio in the frost on her window. A musician in Nairobi builds a new tuning scale from the final pulse intervals. A sculptor in Sao Paulo carves the isosceles triangle into black stone and calls it message without message. The world didn't stop, it pivoted, and now we carry that pivot inside us, like a frequency, like a memory, like a stillness that hums in the bones. And still, they wait. No closer, no farther, just here, unchanged, undemanding, unmistakable. Proof, perhaps, not of intelligence, but of something more radical. Consideration, because they didn't force understanding. They invited us to make it, together. And maybe that's the point, that the universe doesn't explain itself. It just offers itself and waits to see who notices. Leave a comment telling me what you think this was. A message, a relic, a mirror, or just the first note of a symphony written in time and light. Because whatever 3i Atlas is, it saw us, and it stayed. Tonight, sleep, knowing the silence above isn't empty. It's full of presence. A spiral that shimmered, a hum that echoed, a trio of impossible objects that never demanded belief, only attention. You watched, you listened, and maybe that was enough. Let this mystery rest beside you like starlight on water, unresolved, undisturbed, and beautiful. Leave a comment with where you are and what time it is. I want to know who else is awake beneath this quiet sky. Thank you for watching. Thank you for wondering. And now, let the lights fade, let your breath slow, and let the silence hold you.